The city never slept. Neon lights flickered across streets, the hum of traffic echoing like a heartbeat of steel and ambition. Car horns screamed in rhythm with impatient footsteps, while skyscrapers loomed like silent judges, watching over 1,000 lives scuttling beneath them. Among all this movement, the world seemed blind to one simple truth: in the race for survival, humanity was often forgotten. People brushed past each other, eyes fixed on the next deal, the next step, the next gain. And somewhere, in a narrow corner by a busy intersection, sat a man the city had already discarded. He was unremarkable at first glance. His clothes were torn, and his face, though once handsome, was shadowed by hunger and hardship. The people who passed him didn't even see him, they shoved him aside, muttering curses under their breath. And yet, the man sat there quietly, eyes scanning, silently observing, as if he were waiting for something. Across the street was Amarachi standing outside a local canteen, glancing at the same man. She was young, barely 24, with tired eyes and the faintest smile that refused to leave her face, even when the world pressed down on her. Her life was not easy. She worked at the small canteen, earning just enough to pay rent and put food on her table. Her mother was sick, lying on the bed inside the small rented room, and every day brought a new struggle. And yet, when she looked at the man sitting in rags, a pang of compassion stirred deep within her chest. "Poor man," she whispered, almost to herself. "I doubt if he has eaten, has he?" Her co-worker, a sharp-tongued girl named Imelda, laughed from behind the counter. "Stop feeling sorry for him, Amarachi. Look at him. He's a beggar. He'll never do anything with his life. Why waste your pity?" Amarachi shook her head, but didn't reply. Her heart told her what Imelda's words could not: everyone deserves a little kindness. Even a man the world had forgotten. That evening, after the last customer left and the canteen closed, Amarachi carried a plate of leftover jollof rice across the street. The man lifted his head as she approached. His eyes, dark and wary, studied her, but there was no anger, only quiet surprise. I brought this for you," Amarachi said softly. "It may not be much, but you shouldn't sleep hungry tonight." The man blinked. The city had not offered him a single act of generosity in weeks, perhaps months. And here was this young woman, risking ridicule, carrying food across traffic, just for him. Why would you do this?" he asked quietly, almost in disbelief. Amarachi shrugged. "Because someone has to care. Even if it's just me." He took the plate with trembling hands. The scent of the food made his stomach tighten, a sensation he hadn't felt in a long time. For a moment, the noise of the city faded, the screeching tires, the shouting vendors, all of it disappeared, leaving only the warmth of a stranger's kindness. Imelda, standing outside the canteen, snorted loudly. "Are you serious, Amarachi? You're feeding him? You'll get nothing in return. That's a fool's game." Amarachi smiled faintly, ignoring the words. In that instant, she did not see a beggar. She saw a man who had once known better days, a human being deserving of dignity. And perhaps, deep down, she sensed something more: that the world was cruel, but sometimes, just sometimes, it rewarded those who gave without expecting. As she walked back to the canteen, the man finished the last bite, savoring each mouthful. He wanted to say something, to thank her properly, but no words seemed enough. Instead, he watched her retreating figure as she crossed the road. Strange feelings stirring inside him, something long buried under disappointment and betrayal. The city moved on, uncaring, as it always did. And in the heart of the chaos, two souls, one kind, one broken, had silently connected in a way the city could never notice, but one that would change both of their lives forever. That night, Amarachi went home, exhausted but satisfied. She did not know it yet, but her simple act of compassion had begun a story that would ripple far beyond this corner of the city. A story of hidden identities, secret tests, and the undeniable power of kindness. The beggar, sitting alone under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, whispered into the night, "Perhaps, not all hope is lost." And with that, the first seeds of fate had been planted. Morning came slowly, as if the city itself hesitated to wake from its restless night. Amarachi rose early, tired muscles aching, yet a quiet determination glimmered in her eyes. Life was not kind, but she had learned to carve moments of goodness from even the smallest pieces of her day. The canteen was bustling, the smell of steaming jollof rice mingling with the exhaust from the busy street. Customers rushed in and out, impatient and demanding, voices sharp and hurried. Amarachi dished the food with practiced grace, serving plates of food, smiling through exhaustion. And yet, her mind wandered to the man she had fed the night before. The beggar, the world called him, but to her he was simply a human being in need. She wondered if he had eaten well, if he was warm enough, if anyone else had bothered to show him even a fraction of the care she had. During a quiet period, she slipped across the street again, carrying yet a plate of leftover food. Her hands shook slightly from nerves. She hadn't told anyone what she was doing. In fact, she knew she had to hide it. Imelda's sharp voice still echoed in her mind, "Foolish girl, wasting food on a nobody." But Amarachi ignored the warning. She could not. Her heart demanded it. The man was there again, sitting on the same spot, head bowed, as if the weight of the city rested upon him. His clothes were no cleaner than yesterday, his eyes hollow yet watchful. When he saw her approach, he straightened slightly, unsure whether to hope or to expect disappointment. She knelt beside him, placing the plate carefully in his hand. "Eat," she said softly. "It's not much, but it's all I could spare." For a moment, he simply stared at the plate, then at her face. His lips trembled, and he swallowed hard, emotion flickering in his dark eyes. "Why do you care?" he whispered. Amarachi smiled faintly. "Because someone has to. Because no one should go hungry if I can help it. That's all." He nodded slowly, the first trace of something resembling trust appearing in his gaze. He ate carefully, savoring every bite as if it were more than food. It was proof that the world had not entirely forgotten him. The city moved on around them, indifferent as always. People shoved past, some casting curious glances, most ignoring. Later that day, back in the canteen, Imelda could not resist her barbed remark. "So, you fed him again," she sneered. "You really are wasting your life on a man who will never give you anything in return. Why not save your food for yourself?" Amarachi paused, listening to her laughter and whispers of the other employees, but she only shook her head. "Even if he never gives me anything, I know I did the right thing," she said quietly. Amarachi didn't argue. Her heart was full, even if the world didn't understand. She had learned a simple truth: kindness was never truly wasted. It always left a mark, whether on the receiver or the giver, or sometimes, both. Days turned into weeks. Every evening, Amarachi crossed the street with whatever little she could spare, sometimes leftover rice, sometimes beans, sometimes plantain. The beggar never demanded, never asked. He accepted silently, watching her with cautious eyes that slowly began to soften. Sometimes he tested her. He would frown when she approached, saying nothing, letting her hesitate. Or he would mutter ungrateful words, shrug, even toss the food aside in mock irritation. But Amarachi never wavered. She never questioned him, never stopped. And slowly, something extraordinary happened. Amarachi felt the first stirrings of a connection that neither wealth nor poverty could explain, a silent bond of trust, built on simple acts and unspoken understanding. At night, when she sits down to rest in her small cramped room, she would remember the beggar's dark, wary eyes. She wondered who he was, why life had treated him so cruelly, and whether her kindness made any difference at all. Yet even in uncertainty, she felt a spark, a promise whispered in the quiet corners of her heart, that one day, her little acts of compassion might change more than just a man's hunger. And in the shadows of the city streets, the beggar watched too. He did not reveal his thoughts, but inside, a storm of memories and doubts stirred. There was something about this young woman, something rare, something he hadn't seen in years. A goodness untouched by greed or fear. And he knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of a story neither of them could yet imagine. Life in the city was relentless. Every day, Amarachi faced a world that seemed determined to grind her down. The canteen where she worked was cramped and noisy, the clatter of plates and the shouts of impatient customers always threatening to swallow her whole. And yet, through it all, she carried a secret warmth in her heart. her nightly journey to feed the beggar across the street. But kindness, she was beginning to learn, rarely traveled unchallenged. One afternoon, Imelda started running her mouth again. "You're really still feeding that man?" she asked, eyes gleaming with mockery. "He's a street rat, Amarachi. People like him don't deserve your food, let alone your time." Amarachi kept her calm. She had long learned that arguments rarely changed hearts hardened by pride. "I don't feed him because he deserves it. I feed him because someone has to," she replied softly, avoiding Imelda's piercing gaze. Imelda laughed harshly, shaking her head. "Someone has to? That's just stupid. Look at you, slaving for scraps while others live their lives. You think the world will reward you for this foolishness?" A small group of co-workers had gathered, snickering. Amarachi felt a sting, but it did not reach her soul. Deep down, she knew that true generosity required courage, especially in a city that had forgotten how to care. That evening, Amarachi once again approached the beggar with a modest plate of jollof rice. The man let out a sigh of irritation, muttering, "You shouldn't waste your time on me. I don't need your pity." Amarachi hesitated, her hands slightly trembling. "I'm not here to pity you," she said calmly. "I'm here because it's right. Nothing more, nothing less." He grunted and ate, though slower than usual. Amarachi noticed the careful way he held the food, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She understood his tests. He wanted to see if she would stop, if she would grow bitter, if she would abandon him when he acted ungrateful. And every time, she did not. But the city did not let her small victories go unnoticed. Her landlord, a haggard man with a permanent scowl, knocked on her door one morning holding a notice letter. She came outside and the landlord barked at her. "You're behind on rent again," he angrily spoke, holding a notice letter. "I don't care what excuse you have. You need to pay up, or you're out." Amarachi nodded silently, the weight of the world pressing down on her slender shoulders. She had no money to pay, and every day felt like a battle she was losing. Yet she remembered the beggar's wary eyes, and a quiet resolve settled in her chest. She would not let the hardships of the world extinguish her small light of kindness. The following week, 2 children in the neighborhood, emboldened by the city's cruelty, began mocking the beggar. "Go away, filthy man," they jeered, laughing as he sat quietly. Amarachi's heart clenched as she approached the man. She shouted at them and the children ran away. Then she handed the food carefully to him. The beggar looked at her, a flicker of surprise and gratitude passing through his dark eyes. Why do you keep doing this?" he asked, his voice softening despite the irritation he had shown before. "Because someone must," Amarachi replied. "And because no matter how cruel the world is, it doesn't mean we have to be." Days became weeks, and her resolve only strengthened. The city continued to mock, the beggar continued his tests, and life continued to batter her in small and painful ways. Sometimes she went without meals so he could eat. She stayed up at night caring for her sick mother and making sure she took her medication. She often faced humiliation from her co-workers. Yet through it all, she never stopped. One night she asked her mother who her father was, but she brushed it off. "Amarachi, I have told you over and over again to stop asking me a question I have no answer for. I was young and it happened. I strongly believe that if he is still alive he will surely come for you one day." And in the quiet corners of the night, when she finally lay down on her bed, she would whisper to herself, "Kindness is a seed. Maybe today the world will not notice, but one day, it will bloom." The beggar, too, began to notice. Sitting in the dim glow of the streetlight, he reflected on this young woman who gave so freely, who risked ridicule for a stranger. He had seen many in his life, rich men, powerful men and women, friends and enemies, but none had moved him like Amarachi. She was different. Her heart was untainted, unafraid, and true. A storm of memories rose within him. Memories of betrayal, of lost wealth, of a world that had turned its back on him. And yet, despite all he had suffered, he felt something he had not felt in years: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity had not completely died. It was in this space, amidst mockery and trials, that the first threads of fate began to intertwine. The city might have been cold and cruel, but within it, Kindness found a way to survive, waiting for the moment it would be rewarded. Night had fallen over the city, wrapping the streets in a cloak of shadows and flickering streetlights. The neon signs buzzed faintly over the sidewalk where the beggar sat today. He quietly sat at his spot, his eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the street with a depth no ordinary man possessed. No one noticed him. No one cared. The world had long since written him off, and he welcomed its indifference. But tonight, as he held the plate Amarachi had brought earlier, something stirred within him that he had not felt in years, something dangerous and rare: trust. He remembered the first time she had approached him. A young girl, worn from her own struggles, carrying scraps of food for a man the city despised. She had not flinched when others mocked her, had not turned away when life seemed unfair. She had seen him, not the rags, not the empty stomach, but the man beneath. And that thought, simple, almost naive, struck a chord deep inside him. He was no ordinary beggar. In truth, he was Chief Obin Nwachi, once the wealthiest man in the city, a billionaire, a titan of industry whose name commanded respect in boardrooms and reverence in the halls of power. The founder and CEO of Nwachi Empire. But betrayal had shattered him. Trusted friends had turned thieves, partners had lied, and the wealth he had built had been almost stripped from him. Heartbroken and weary, he had abandoned his former life. Yet he could not abandon the world entirely. He needed to know if humanity still existed beneath the layers of greed, fear, and pride. And so he had disguised himself, becoming a ghost in the city's relentless rhythm, observing the world from the lowest of vantage points, testing those who crossed his path. And in that test was a kind young woman, Amarachi. Every act of kindness she showed him, every plate of food, every whispered word of care, it was a mirror, reflecting the humanity he feared was gone. She did not ask for anything in return. She did not demand, manipulate, or bargain. She simply gave. He thought back to the many faces of the city he had once trusted, the smiles that hid betrayal, the handshakes that concealed knives. And now, here was a girl who offered warmth without condition. He wondered, could the world still contain such hearts? Could someone like her survive in a city that seemed designed to crush hope? He tested her in small ways. Sometimes he acted rude, dismissive, even ungrateful. Other times, he simply said nothing, letting her doubt whether her efforts mattered. And every time, she persisted. He could not decide if it was courage or foolishness, but he knew it was rare. Unusually rare. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine the unimaginable, that someone's kindness, even small, could still change the course of a life. Yet even as he sat there, he reminded himself of the rules. The test was not over. He could not reveal who he was, could not allow attachment to cloud judgment. The city had hardened him, and he had learned that mercy without measure could be dangerous. But Amarachi's acts were different, they carried a weight, a purity he had not encountered in decades. The city roared around him, the traffic, the shouting vendors, the flashing lights, all meaningless. In that corner, under the dim glow of the streetlight, he made a silent promise to himself. One day, the world will know what true kindness looks like. And the one who showed it when no one else did, she will be remembered. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He had seen many faces over the years, some seeking, some scheming, most corrupt. But she had something he had long thought lost in the world, a heart untouched by the poison of greed. And as he watched the quiet street one day, he felt a stirring deep in his chest, one he had buried beneath betrayal, disappointment, and silence. Perhaps the world is not completely lost, he thought. Perhaps hope still walks among us, in the most unexpected forms. And with that thought, he imagined a future he dared not yet speak of, a story that had only just begun. Amarachi rose each morning before the sun dared to peek over the horizon. Her small room smelled faintly of mildew, and the thin mattress barely kept her warm, but she did not complain. She had no luxury of time or indulgence. Life demanded effort, sacrifice, and resilience, and she had learned to give all three. Her sick mother Flora's medical treatments drained the little money Amarachi earned, and often she went without food herself just to ensure her mother had something to eat. Yet, even in these moments of scarcity, she carried on her daily ritual, feeding the beggar across the street. That afternoon, after a particularly grueling shift at the canteen, she collected her remaining leftovers food and crossed the street once again. The beggar was waiting, sitting in his usual corner. But today, he said nothing, simply watching her approach with a silent intensity that made her pause. "You don't have to come every day," he said softly, his voice low, almost hesitant. "You give too much, more than you can spare." Amarachi shook her head. "If I have enough for me, I have enough to share. I cannot turn away from someone in need." He studied her. He wanted to test her, push her limits, see if her resolve would crumble when life pressed hardest. But she did not falter. She had known hardship since she could remember, and her heart had hardened not in cruelty, but in compassion. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Amarachi's sacrifices became heavier. The landlord's threats grew more frequent. The bills she could not pay stacked higher and higher. Imelda's ridicule became sharper, her words like knives cutting through exhaustion. Yet she persisted, motivated not by reward or recognition, but by something far rarer, a belief in the quiet power of kindness. One evening, she returned home to find a note the landlord left with her mother. "If you do not pay your rent by Friday, you will be evicted." Her heart sank. She had nothing to give, no money to satisfy the demands of a city that measured value only in wealth. But as she sat down, staring at the note, she remembered the beggar's words from days before: "You give too much, but it is the heart that counts." And somehow, that thought carried her through. She prepared a small meal for her mother, gave her medication, and whispered softly, "We'll find a way." Somehow, we always do. The beggar, meanwhile, observed all and had seen lives crushed under the weight of a merciless city, but Amarachi's resilience impressed him more than any act of wealth or power ever could. She gave not because she had abundance, but because she had a heart strong enough to endure poverty without letting it harden her spirit. It was in these quiet, often unnoticed moments that the beggar realized something extraordinary. This young woman, fragile in body but indomitable in spirit, was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her kindness was not a fleeting gesture, it was a philosophy, a way of life that refused to bend before the cruelty of the world. And yet, he remained hidden, a silent observer, testing her patience, her compassion, her very humanity. He knew the city had hardened him, taught him to trust no one, but Amarachi was different. Every sacrifice she made, every challenge she faced, every tear she wiped from her own eyes to feed another, he noticed it all. The city, blind to her quiet heroism, continued on. But in the small bubble of their shared, unspoken connection, the world felt a little less harsh, a little more human. And deep inside him, a seed planted months ago began to grow, a seed of hope, of something he had long thought impossible: belief that someone's goodness could truly change a life. Not just his life, but perhaps, one day, the life of the girl who had unknowingly shown him what the world had forgotten: compassion, courage, and unyielding kindness. The city was alive as ever, but Amarachi felt a strange emptiness that evening. She had crossed the street with a small plate of food, the familiar rhythm of her ritual carrying her forward, but when she reached the corner, he was gone. The beggar, the man who had become a quiet, constant presence in her life, was nowhere to be seen. The small cardboard sign leaning beside him, usually marked with a plea or a hopeful message, was gone. His usual place, where he had sat for weeks, was empty, and the faint scent of the city's grime seemed to mock her confusion. Where could he have gone? She whispered to herself, scanning the streets, but the world gave no answer. 4 days, Amarachi searched. She asked vendors, passers-by, even nearby shopkeepers. "Have you seen the beggar?" A man, dark-skinned, ragged clothes, she inquired, her voice trembling slightly with worry. Most shook their heads, some shrugged, and a few offered a shrug that felt almost cruel. Rumors began to spread. Some said he had been taken by the authorities. Others whispered that he had died. Amarachi's heart ached at each suggestion, her mind replaying every small smile, every moment of silent understanding they had shared. Her nights became restless. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining his eyes, the faint glimmer of recognition she had seen when he accepted her first acts of kindness. She missed him not just for the small meals she had given him, but for the quiet companionship they had formed without words, a bond built on humanity, trust, and courage. The mother noticed her worries and asked, "What bothers you, my daughter? You look disturbed." "Mama, it's the beggar I give food every day. I am worried. Maybe something bad has happened to him." "Nothing will happen to him. Calm down, my daughter, he will surely return." And yet, life continued to batter her. The landlord's threats grew louder, the bills heavier. Her small victories at the canteen seemed meaningless against the weight of reality. Even her friends, those who had once laughed with her, kept their distance, leaving her to bear the burden alone. But in the quiet corners of her heart, Amarachi refused to give up. She remembered the beggar's words, spoken weeks ago in his low, weary voice. "Never stop doing good, my daughter. Heaven sees." Those words became her lifeline. Even in his absence, they guided her. She helping her sick mother, and offered small acts of kindness wherever she could. Though the world had taken the beggar from her sight, it could not take the lessons he had silently left behind. Amarachi endured, surviving on determination and hope, her thoughts frequently drifting to the man who had vanished from her life. She could not explain why she cared so much for someone who had given her nothing in return, and yet, every beat of her heart whispered the same truth: he had touched her life in a way that no one else had. And in that silence, the first threads of destiny began to tighten. The city, cold and indifferent, had not yet revealed its secret. The beggar had returned to the shadows for a purpose, and the moment of revelation, the moment when kindness would be rewarded, was slowly approaching. For Amarachi, life had become a test of faith, perseverance, and endurance. For the beggar, it was a test of observation, judgment, and perhaps, something he had long forgotten, trust. And somewhere between the bustling streets and the neon lights, the story of their intertwined fates was quietly and unstoppably moving toward a moment that would change everything. Life continued to press on her shoulders like an unyielding weight, yet she continued to rise before the sun, work through exhaustion, and care for those who depended on her. The afternoon sun burned gently over the city as Amarachi washed plates at the canteen. Customers chatted loudly, plates clinked, and the smell of fresh jollof rice filled the air. She worked with quiet grace, serving with the same smile she had given the beggar weeks ago. Then suddenly a sleek black car rolled to a stop outside the canteen. Heads turned. Whispers spread like wildfire. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a clean, perfectly tailored designer suit, shoes polished like glass, his presence commanding silence. He walked in calmly, sat at a corner and ordered for food. The customers gasped. Amarachi froze, the plate of food trembling in her hand. A man of his class does not eat in such a local canteen, but yet he sat comfortably waiting for his food. Everyone stared as Amarachi, still shaken, went to serve him. Her hands trembled as she placed the steaming plate before him. He smiled faintly, and for a moment, it felt like the world stopped. After eating quietly, he stood outside, in a voice steady enough to silence the people, he said, "Do you know or remember me? I know none of you would. I once walked the streets in rags. Why I begged at that spot like a man with nothing." He pointed towards the place he always sat to beg. "I was searching. Testing hearts. To see who would show kindness when there was nothing to gain." Amarachi's breath caught. It was him, the beggar. The man she had fed from her little. But today, no one would ever mistake him for a beggar. "I met many," he continued, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "They mocked me, pushed me aside. Some even cursed me. But one person saw me as human, not as dirt. She fed me. She shared her little. She gave without expectation." He paused, his gaze locking with Amarachi's. The silence deepened. "And that person is Amarachi." Some whispered. Others covered their mouths in shock. All eyes fell on Amarachi. The man straightened, his voice firm. "I am Chief Obinna Nwachi, owner of the Nwachi Empire. I am a billionaire, an entrepreneur, and employer of thousands. And today, before all who mocked her, I declare, this woman's kindness has lifted her higher than wealth ever could." He turned to Amarachi, his words like thunder and honey all at once. "From today, you will never lack again. You will have wealth, opportunities, and honor. And all who mocked you will lower their heads in shame." The same mouths that had once spat at her now hung open. Heads bowed low. Even Imelda, who had ridiculed her the most, could not speak. Amarachi fell to her knees. But Chief Obinna gently lifted her up. "No, Amarachi," he said softly. "You lifted me when I had nothing. Now it is my turn to lift you." That evening, he asked her to take him to her home. Together they rode in his car until they arrived at her small compound. The landlord was already waiting, face stern, ready to throw out her belongings that day for unpaid rent. But the moment Chief Obinna stepped out in his suit and presence, the landlord's pride melted. With a single signature, Chief Obinna offered him a check and paid off everything and more. But the true twist awaited inside. As Amarachi entered inside the house and told her mother the good news, they both stepped outside to thank the man who has changed their lives. Suddenly her eyes widened, her body shook as recognition pierced her heart. "Chief," she whispered, trembling. It can't be you." Chief Obinna froze, staring at her face, memories flooding back. "Flora," he said slowly, his voice breaking. "Flora, my chef, years ago, you disappeared." Tears rolled down Flora's cheeks. "Yes. I disappeared because I was pregnant. I feared shame, rejection, and I left. And this child," she turned toward Amarachi, who stood in shock, her world spinning, "this child is yours." Silence. The revelation hung heavy in the air like thunder waiting to strike. Chief Obinna staggered, eyes darting from Flora to Amarachi. His lips trembled. "Amarachi, my child?" Amarachi's world spun faster than her heart could keep up. She dropped to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Chief Obinna pulled her up, his embrace tight. "All this time, I tested the world, not knowing the one heart that passed my test was my own blood. My own daughter." That evening Flora's shame and secret laid bare. But instead of anger, Chief Obinna only shook his head slowly, whispering, Destiny brought me back. What I lost has been found." Flora was taken to the best hospital for proper treatment and he took them in as family. "My people, did you see it? The beggar was the billionaire, the mocked girl was his daughter, and the kindness that lifted her was blood calling to blood. Those who mocked now bowed their heads. The girl who gave without expecting was rewarded with wealth, honor, and a father she never knew. Ah, kindness is never wasted. It is a seed, sometimes it grows into bread, sometimes into riches, and sometimes into the very family you were searching for. If this story touched you, please kindly subscribe if you have not, like and comment. Thank you for watching. Remain blessed.